Welcome everyone. I am Talay from the Fabric Patch in Ironwood, Michigan. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. I'm sorry, no visuals of this person. Quarantine has kind of taken its toll on the visual, and my daughter made it clear the other day when she was looking over my video that the hair was a little out of place, you know how daughters can be. Well, I decided that the hands looked just fine for doing this project. So therefore, those of you who know me can start laughing. Those of you who don't, someday I'll give you a picture. So as of right now, this is me. I would like to introduce you to I Didn't Do It. A quick story on this project, guys. Last Christmas, I had 2 weeks off, which I usually get around Christmas because I teach for a local college. And I was bored, and yes, I was working at the shop. And I started thinking, I need something to send my brain, especially the Swiss cheese brain, on a vacation. Now, a lot of people think, well, you sew every day, you create every day. Yes, I do. Problem. It is always for something that has to be done, especially an upcoming class. And that can get irritating after a while because, again, the brain just decides, it doesn't want to do it anymore. So I thought going on a vacation meant I needed a challenge that had no reason whatsoever, just because. So I was sitting there at the counter looking around, and I looked at the fabric line that we've gotten in called Stiletto. And it's by Moda. And it's kind of a dark color, has dark colors in it and a few yellows, not very much in the brights, which is definitely not up my alley, believe me. So I thought, okay, here goes a challenge. But I didn't want to bring home 10 yards of fabric. That'd defeat the whole purpose, right? So I thought, wait a minute. There's a layer cake and a jelly roll. So I grabbed those and I brought them home. And so this is what I came up with. This kind of interesting looking quilt that has its own little attitude. And yes, there are other quilts out there like this, so don't think this is a 100%. It's on its own, but it does have its variations, and it is unique to what I did. And while I was sewing this and creating it, I love to name my projects just because it's cool. Everybody else does, so why can't I? So I got some help with the name from my 3-year-old granddaughter. Oh boy. Well, I had asked her to pick up some stuff, and she just kind of looked at me and walked away and said, typical 3-year-old, I didn't do it, Nana. Well, needless to say, Nana informed us very carefully that I saw her drop the toys on the floor, and therefore she needed to pick them up and put them away. Well, she did. We didn't have too much of an argument. She took care of what she was supposed to. So I went back to sewing, and I kept sewing. And then I started looking at the blocks and still trying to figure out what the heck name am I going to name this silly quilt. I looked at the blocks a little more, and wait a minute, they looked like shattered glass. Now, I do have another quilt in my collection that someday hopefully will end up on the pattern rack, called Shattered. So that name just didn't work. And I thought, wait, I like it. I didn't do it. So here is I Didn't Do It. Okay, in this segment of our video, what we're going to be talking about is what we need to make this quilt. Now, if you'll see here, I do not have a jelly roll because this particular collection of fabric, which this is my layer cake, does not have a jelly roll that goes with it. At least we don't have one at the shop. So I have used yardage. Yardage is, I've got it calculated. It will be in the pattern in which you have received. And also I'll discuss both ways on how to use our yardage. So what you will get is either a jelly roll, or in this case, just a grouping of 2.5-inch strips. And yes, I pulled this out of my collection. We won't talk about the colors. just for the fact that we just won't. Anyway, so this is kind of what the packaging you'll get. 2.5-inch strips in a traditional jelly roll or in a Bali Pop or any of those other names out there. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but they're the 2.5-inch pre-cuts. Okay? So this particular set of pre-cuts, I'm going to disappear. All right. We're going to deal with those later. Now, we have our yardage, which, as I said before, we're not going to use it right now. So again, that is what I'm going to disappear as well. Okay. I have my layer cake still here, and I'm going to need some marking tools. These marking tools are, these are the 2 Frixon pens, and they are heat erasable. You can also use just the traditional old ballpoint pen, that's fine too, because we're going to be marking the outside edge. There'll be some marks along the edge of our squares that we're going to connect. And with those connections, we will be cutting. So it doesn't really matter if it's something that can stay there or not. So these are some pens that we will need eventually here. We will need a ruler that will actually go all the way across our blocks. So at least a 12-inch ruler. Doesn't matter how wide, just a good 12-inch ruler because we need the full length. So those are 2 items that we're going to need as well. And I'll set those aside out of the way for the moment. And now, what I really highly recommend is the 60mm cutter. Yes, the 45 works fine. The thickness that we have here is not too bad because we're going to be cutting through 6 layers of fabric. Don't panic, ladies. Oh, yes, and I'll add you in there out there. Hopefully we have a couple of gentlemen joining us as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be using a nice big rotary cutter with a fresh blade. How do I know? We will hold that for later discussion. I am a good one for not changing my blades and blaming my cutting boards and blaming myself, so that's fine. Okay, so again, I'm going to set this aside for the moment. We're not quite to this point. All right, a layer cake. A layer cake can have anywhere from 40 to 42 10-inch squares. Now, the nice thing about a layer cake is it all comes from one collection or one line of fabric. Therefore, they blend, they work together. You don't have to have any thought pattern to it. You don't have to go out there and decide if this maroon works with this or this green works with that green. They are all from one collection, one designer. So that's the nice thing about this. Okay, what we need is to take out 30 squares out of this set of 10-inch squares that we have in our layer cake. The best thing is to try not to get any repeats, but not every line of fabric out there has 40 different pieces or maybe 42 pieces. So we'll have a few repeats and you can mix and match those in. So we need 30 pieces. Once we have our 30 pieces, we're going to divide those into 5 stacks of 6. Yes, I did say 6, and I need 5 stacks because we have 30 blocks. Little note here. This particular quilt was originally going to be 36 blocks. And because I had to cut 6 layers, I had originally cut 1 set with an error in it. Needless to say, the error was big enough that the block changed shape and didn't blend with the others. It would have stuck out like a sore thumb. I could have put it in the corners. Who knows what I could have done with it. But it would have changed the entire feel of the quilt. And besides that, as a 5x6 quilt, it gives it some length. It's not just a box. So maybe it was a mistake that I needed to do. I don't know. But we need 30 10-inch squares. And then we're going to divide them into 5 piles. We got my little 5 piles here. They're kind of mixed and matched. My 5 piles of 6 squares each. So let's get that done, and then we will go to the next step. Okay, here we go with our marking instructions. By looking at what you have on the video, may look a little different than what you have in your handouts, but don't panic. There's the exact same information, it's just the computer screen moved it around so that I can at least display it without having to type on it. So it's the same information. So take a look at page 1. On the first page we have a square that is representative of our 10-inch square. There are little orange tick marks around that square. Those are the markings that we need to mark on the top of our stack of 6 squares. So pick a marker that is going to show up on your top fabric. If the fabric is so dark that you can't mark on it, rotate that fabric down, and it's not really going to matter where in the stack it is. Just don't put it in the same position as in another stack. So if you have a light one that's the identical fabric in the second row of the third stack, just move it down a couple. This just helps keeping the variances on each of the stacks, and when we put it together, not too many of the same shape ends up with the same fabric in every one of them. That's why we do this in stacks of 6, and I underline exclamation point 6 only. So from here, what I need to do is we're going to look at right here. We need to mark 3 inches, 4.5 inches, and 2.5 inches. Each one of those has a measurement all the way around. So let's go ahead and measure and mark those. Alrighty. Now, by looking at my instructions, and I know here in the video I can't really show you the instructions because the lighting is kind of bright on this one, and I don't have high-tech lighting in my little sewing room. I'm doing the best I can. But look at your instructions. And what we have is the best way to do this is to position your ruler so that it is just down from the edge, just a little bit here, and have the 10 on your right hand side. Whether you're left-handed, right-handed, it doesn't matter. This works out pretty good. So put the 10-inch right along the edge of the fabric over here, and then just a little bit off the edge here. So our first measurement is at 3 inches, and I am using a pen that I can see. So mine is orange because my top fabric in this case, it looks kind of brown in the screen here, but it's actually green. So here we go. I'm going to measure 1, 2, 3 inches. And I'm going to put a mark right there. And like I say, a lot of this is going to get trimmed off, so we really don't matter as to what color it is, but just as long as we can see it. So now I'm going to measure 4.5 inches. 1, 2, 3, 4.5 inches. And I'm going to put another mark. There we go. Now, of course, let's try math. Should be 2.5 inches left. By George, it is. Now, if I turn my ruler clockwise, just rotate it clockwise, I don't have to do very much math. I can just count off easily. So on my instruction sheet, I need 6 inches down this way. Okay? Of course, that beautiful light is right where it's not supposed to be, but that's okay. It's all we can do. So I have a 6-inch mark right here. It's on my 6-inch ruler. Let me see if I can do it. Oops, the wrong one. That's okay. And that leaves me 4 inches from here to here. So now I'm going to rotate my ruler again, and I'm going to measure along the bottom. If I look at my instructions, I have 3 inches, and then I should have 7 inches left. So here's my 3 inches. Again, my ruler's nice and even. 1, 2, 3, and I'm just going to put another nice little mark there. Rotate my ruler one more time, and I'm going to end up with 2 inches here and 1.5 up to here. Can we see these okay? 2 inches here, 1.5 inches here, which leaves me 6.5 here. Well, let's check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and by George, there's my 1/2 inch. So I still can add. Wow, don't tell the kids. I always tell them I can subtract and there's nothing left in the bank account. So there we go. Okay, so now what I need to do is I can put away my pen for the moment. I'm going to be needing it again, so don't get it too far away. I'm using a small mat that I can rotate my block on. I don't want to move my stack any more than I have to. So right now I'm going to rotate this block, and my first cut, because I'm going to go to page 2 now, and let's see here. Okay, now if we look at our instructions on page 2, there's a real spidery looking thing. It's got all of these big lines all over it. Each one of the dotted lines is a cut line, and they have numbers next to them. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Even though we have 6 fabrics, we only have 5 cuts. And those little marks along the edges is what I need to connect. So my first connection is between the top one, which we can all see way up at the top here, straight across to the bottom one down here, and it has the number 1 right here. So I'm going to connect those and cut that cut. And then I'm going to work my way around with each one of these. I will not be bouncing back and forth between my screens, so I want you to follow along on your instructions so you can get this, because you're going to have to do this 4 more times, because we're only going to cut one stack of 6 pieces, cut them, sew them, set them aside, and then do the next ones, because we do not want to do more than a set of 6 at a time. That's what the nice thing about this quilt is. You don't have to spend all your time cutting and then start sewing. You cut, sew, and that way all your blocks remain the way they're originally supposed to look like when you first decided on who belonged where. Okay, here we go. I have my first mark up here and my other mark down here. And like I said, I rotated this by using a smaller mat. I can turn my blocks around. This is cut 1. By looking at my chart, I can see I need to cut connecting those 2. Do not start panicking, you OCD people. Precision is not needed, I should say. Oops. Is not needed, but be accurate. Don't cut your pieces way off the mark. A little bit doesn't hurt a thing. So take your time when cutting this. And again, I'm using that great big blade, making sure I cut through all my layers at one go. So I'm going to cut this here. I can hear that my blade didn't quite cut them all. There they are. And then I'm going to gently just grab the corners out here and pull this away far enough apart that when I cut my next cut, I'm not going to hit it. Cut number 2, by looking at my instructions, says that it goes across the bottom here. So let's rotate this back into position. This is cut number 2 across the bottom here. So if I put my ruler here and tried to cut this way, I could cut crooked. So I'm going to rotate my mat ever so slightly and line up along the bottom edge right off my 2-inch mark, just like so, and cut that set. There we go. Now this set is ready to go. I'm going to move those out of the way. Now, cut number 3, it's from over here to a connection point here. So let me rotate my block back into position so you can see what I'm doing. Once you do this a few times, you don't have to keep rotating it back to the original position because you'll be pretty good at this. So you got it rotated back into original position. I need to have something to connect over here. So if you look on your instructions, on this side, this particular piece, there is an arrow. It's a blue arrow, comes down this way, and it says 2 inches. We're going to measure down 2 inches from that spot. And so I'm going to take my good old trusty ruler here, and I'm going to measure down 2 inches, making sure I stay straight down here. I'm not going to do 2 inches this way or 2 inches this way. I want it straight down. So I'm going to use the bottom edge of my cut here as my guide, coming right off that tip. And here's my good old marker again. 2 inches down, I'm going to come straight across and put my mark there. Precision is not necessary, but close is good. This time we're actually playing hand grenades and horseshoes, but we want it to look as close as possible without being absolutely mathematically correct. Put my pen down for the moment. I'm now going to rotate my block so that I can line up my new mark and the mark that I put over here at the 1.5 inch, because I did 2 inches, 1.5 inches. So I'm going to line up those two. And by the way, this is where I made my mistake on my last set, that when we were supposed to have 36 blocks, because you're cutting 6 at one go. That was 6 blocks with the same error. So try not to do that. And so now I'm going to cut these. I have a feeling I didn't quite go through. There it is. And gently pull that one apart. Okay, I'm going to set my ruler aside, move my blocks into mat back into position. I'm going to get these out of the way. Just move them over there, put that one over there, that one over there. Keep them in their position and orientation. Now I'm going to deal with the other half of my block here. Okay, so if I look at my instructions, I have a cut. I'm up to cut number 4. That's from here to here. You'll notice this little mark right here is the only one on this side, guys. I need to find my mark here. So you will see that there is one that says 4 inches down from here. Remember how I did this side over here? This is what I'm going to do on this side over here. So I'm going to set my ruler down. I'm going to just use this as a general guide, and this is a guide over here, just so that I'm not sitting like this or this. And I'm going to come straight down at 4 inches. So here's my 4-inch mark. Not quite enough room to make a mark, so let's line this up. And I can do a nice 4-inch mark right here. Now, I always like to put my lids on because I have a tendency to run over them with my hands, and interesting colors on my hands. I'm going to rotate my quilt block, or my stack of blocks, and here's the 2 connecting points. Very simple. Line those puppies up and cut through. Every once in a while it's worth another cut, which was a good one there because I did hit a second cut. I heard it. I can move this back down out of the way. Ooh, looky there. I really did have a second cut. Now I have one more cut, and it is from this point to here. But I don't have a mark here. Again, I'm going to look at my picture. I have a 2-inch mark here. So if I rotate my block just enough, I can place my ruler, well, which would be easier, probably do it this way. I can still take 2 inches, and I'm going to use an outside edge here as my guide. Keeping this on the edge of my fabric, so this one here on the edge of my fabric, just so that I know that I am square. And I need to mark 2 inches in. So in this case, I have a 4 sitting here, so I got 1, 2, and here is my mark, 2 inches in. You all happy with that, I hope? Guess what? Pen can go away now until my next stack of 6. So now I'm going to rotate my block. Yes, it is completely upside down. But I need to make sure that I can cut this cut. It's going to be a walky one, but that's okay. Take my cutter and make sure that I'm all cut through. And I'm done with this for the moment. All right, I'm going to rotate this all back into position. Keep all your segments in their original placements so that this way we will be able to work with them in the correct order in which they were supposed to be done. On the next set of pages we have a listing. Actually, it's right underneath your spider web, as I call it, where all those funky lines were, because on mine I had to go to a different page, but it's still the same illustration. You will see red numbers. You see these red numbers, ladies? And yes, oh, excuse me, gentlemen. If we have any out there, and I hope we do, these are the red numbers. Okay, and in these red numbers, each one of these is the stack. So this would be stack 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And over here we have each stack will be given a number as indicated. Stack 1 is left in its original order, so we don't monkey with that stack at all. Stack 2, we are going to take the very first piece of fabric and put it to the bottom. And then we're going to repeat this process with each of our stacks. Like on stack 3, we're going to stake the top 2 to the bottom. Stack 4, we got 3 to the bottom, 5, 4 to the bottom, 6, 5 to the bottom. And this way is a way we're going to mix these up without really throwing our sequencing off and trying to figure out, oh, this one doesn't go with that one doesn't go with that one. It's kind of random, but not really random. So let's go take a look at our stacks and get those put together. Here we are. We've got all our stacks cut and we kind of put them back together so at least we can understand 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. As we can see in our instructions, like we talked about a few minutes ago, this one right here, we're going to leave as is. Nobody's going to go anywhere. This is stack number 2. Stack number 2, we're going to take the very top one and put it to the bottom of the stack. Keep it in the same position. Who cares if they're lined up? Just as in the same position. Over here, we're going to take the top 2, keeping them in their same position or same sequencing. Put them to the bottom, and those 2 will be right there. On this particular stack, we have 3. 1, 2, 3. They go to the bottom. Stack number 5, we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Keeping them in their orientation, and they go to the bottom. And of course on this one we need 5 to the bottom, so we can take the last one and put it on top. Here we go. This is kind of what our block is going to look like, our very first block. They will change as we go along, but here's our very first block. And now what I have to do is set up for sewing, and then we'll be back with our next short video, which is also part of today's presentation, but I just got to change my format here. So everybody should be to this position with one set of 6 only. Once you get used to it, maybe another subject for those of you speed sewers, but let's start this way, just for giggles. Alrighty, we'll talk to you in a minute. Welcome back, everybody. Okay, now we're ready to sew. We have done all our cutting, and right now I'm on page 2 of our instructions, right where we had looked at last time when we were restacking things. There's this really big, thick purple arrow right here in the middle of everything. That arrow is just to remind you, we want to keep the inner edges of 1, 2, and 3 as clean along that line as we can. The other side would have 6 and 4 because 5 is not connected to that center at all. It's over on one side. So those two edges, we want to keep them pretty clean. They won't be exact, but they'll be pretty clean. So now what we can do is let's scroll down, or I will scroll down, put it that way. You guys are going to turn your pages, excuse me, to page 3. Now right here on page 3, it's going to talk about how to put these pieces back together. They look pretty straightforward, but if you just line up the edges and sew, you'll end up with kittywampus. Yes, it's the newest technology word, kittywampus. I know most of you know it, but I like saying it, kittywampus. Okay, here we go. You're going to put section 2 right sides together with section 1. And right here on this little ear, we want it to stick a 1/4 inch past. If for some reason you're uncomfortable understanding what that little area should be, draw a seam allowance right along here. You can see where my line is my mouse is moving. And I can draw in a line right in here. And that way I know where that needs to intersect with section 1. I'll show you this on my real stuff here in a moment. But this way, the bottom piece down here, I know it's not very easy to see on here, but right down here where I'm circulating my mouse, that does not need to line up exactly. You just want to make sure those two edges stay even, and your little ear sticking out here is a 1/4 inch. So now let's go off to the real life thing and stop talking about this set of instructions and take a look at what we're going to do. Okay, right here we have the block as we remembered when I got it all cut up. This is how it was sitting. This is sections 1 and 2. So let's gather those up and move these guys out of the way. We'll deal with them later. So what I'm going to do here is I need to put this one to this one. My machine is set up with a 1/4 inch presser foot. For those of you who have one, please use it. Nice 1/4 inch foot. And this way it just makes it easier for you. But we are going to be using an accurate 1/4 inch. Doesn't mean it has to be precise. It's just as nice and clean 1/4 inch as we can get. I'm going to take piece 1, take piece 2, just like so if I can get hold of it, and I'm going to put them right sides together. Now I want to make sure this little ear right here, I want to move it over here so we can see it a little bit. This little ear right here is a 1/4 inch. So if I'm not too comfortable with doing that, what I can do is take my ruler, a nice measuring device. Oops, that one's upside down. And I can take this piece and I can draw. Yes, I have to rotate it around. I'm right-handed, so we'll do this upside down. Just like this. And what I'm keeping is my little line just off the edge of my fabric, and I can draw a line right there. And this will show me right here where that 1/4 inch mark is. So let's set this out of the way. And as time goes, you'll get more used to this. So if you're confused, go ahead and put it back into the position that you had. Make sure this little guy is sitting here. Put him like this, and then flip him over. I know it's a lot of flipping, but hey, it works, guys. I do it a lot. Okay. Now, if you will notice, my 1/4 inch mark is right here. Yes, it's right there. And then I have the bottom edge down here doesn't line up to a 1/4 inch, but that's okay. So can we see this? Right here, 1/4 inch. my little ear sticking off. So let me do this right quick. I will sew this, and I have only one camera, so we are going to pretend like you are watching me actually stitch this. And I'm going to keep those two edges nice and even all the way down. Do not stretch. And if you're sewing the flannels, yes, you are going to have a little bit of give and stretch on that as well. Okay, so here's my seam allowance. I've got it nicely straightly done. Oh, I probably should use a different color thread, shouldn't I? For those of you that absolutely hate pushing to one side, this is one time I'm going to say we're going to press the seams open. Again, this is a personal choice, but I found that by pressing my seams open, and I am finger pressing, this is where one of those neat little roller guys works beautifully, because this is a very stretchy piece of fabric. This is the flannels. Flannels are a pain in the neck, but that's how we do it. Okay, I'm going to just keep these over here for now because I want to go through the whole block so you guys can actually sew. Today I'm not going to sew the whole piece for you to look at. Now, I'm going to take this and position it back into the position that it originally was in. Here's number 2, number 3. I'm going to grab one of those. If I can grab it, it's got static cling, what can I say? I'm now going to position this right across the bottom here. So let's take a look on our instructions. Okay, alrighty. We have sections 1 and 2 sewed together. Here is section 3. Now, just because this outside edge over here, see this outside edge over here, looks like it should be straight, it is not. We're going to line it up with this corner, just off that 1/4 inch again. So these pictures are pretty good, so follow them along. So let's take a look back at our real life thing. Okay, here we are back at our regular piece. Sorry, there was a little bit of a glitch in there. I have this really silly habit of hitting stop instead of pause. So that kind of stopped my video, but here we go. We just pick up where we left off. We're good at this. So now I have taken section 3, placed it right sides together with sections 2 and 1. Again, if I wanted to, I could take my ruler, draw my little line here, mark it, and that way I'm drawing it on section 3 here. Oops, I got another little twig of thread there. So I've got it on section 3 here. I'm going to put it on here, just like so. And it's just got that little piggy ear sticking out there. And that way, I know out here is going to be just nothing, but this side I want as clean as possible. Remember that, ladies and gentlemen. So let me quickly sew this together. Get the big old baby running here. Now you want to keep these edges together as straight and clean as possible. Do not stretch. Let the machine do the work for you. That's what those feed dogs are for, to do our work for us. Okay, I've got this here. And now when I push this over, you can see that my edge right here is nice and clean. This edge over here has got a wobble and a wobble, but we're not too concerned about that. So what we're going to do now is set this piece aside. We've got section, the whole half, first half done, I should say, because we've got sections within sections here. We have the first half of our block done. So we're going to set this aside. And like I said before, I'm going to only do one whole block. I won't go through the whole thing, but you can string piece these, clothesline. We all have 1,000 different names for them. But when you do them, just make sure you keep them in order. And that way when you put your next piece on, the next ones, they end up in the same sequence. Because like over here, you can see this one is 1, 2, and 3. So this would be my next sequence, and I want to keep them in that sequence. So as you cut them off, put them back in their order, and this is one of the biggest things that you can't get messed up. It just throws the whole block off, and then you spend most of your time trying to figure out what you want to do. Okay, first half done. Let's take a look at our second half. I'm going to go over here and pull up our instructions again. Okay, on this section, what we're going to do is we're going to start out putting 5 and 6 together because they both have to fit completely downside of the section 4. So we're going to take sections 5 and 6 and put them right sides together. Now this time we have a little twiggy corner here, but it doesn't stick out like our other ones do. Oh my, we got dingleberries going on. But we don't want a real big ear, but we want it just to peek out a 1/4 inch. Again, same thing. You can draw a line if you want to, but this is important to keep that inside line very straight. So here we go. Let me go change screens again, and let's take a look and see what we're going to do now. Alrighty, here is sections 4 or 5 and 6. Now, like I showed you a minute ago, we need to put these right sides together, just like so. Now, like I've said before, if you are having problems and lining up these little bitty corners down here, we'll go ahead and draw a line, which I have done, and I've marked it so that it comes just a little peak like that. The one thing you do need to be careful of, again, is this stretching. Just for the fact that this is flannel, and I'm kind of glad I chose the flannel for that reason. It shows you that not everything works out perfectly straight and that it will stretch on you. So just be careful. And now I'm going to sew this seam right here. So let me get myself organized here. Get my edges nice and even, making sure my 1/4 inch mark stays right where I want it to be. And off I go. And there we go. Perfect. Okay, here we go. And there is my sections 4 or 5 and 6. And if you'll notice, I've got a little kitty wampus, but that's okay. I wanted this edge down here to be straight. Okay, now this is the fun one. The last piece that we put in usually has the most confusion because it's got the longest little nose that's so hard to line up because it lines up with this center line that we want to keep so nice and straight. So let me push this up a little bit, and I'm going to zip over to the screen for our instructions so that we can take a look at our instructions together. Just a second. Here we are. What we want to look at is this very little tip of our little piece on number 4. Number 4 has a very skinny little tip, and because it needs to line up nice and straight in that middle, it's a little more picky than the one that was in section or in the first half. This one is on the inside. So again, draw that line if you need to. That way it's a 1/4 inch right off of that point, and you can line it up. So now that we've got a really good look at what we're going to be doing, we're going to go back over to our block that we are sewing on, and let's take a look at what that's going to look like, I guess, in real life. So see you in a second. Okay, here we are. This is section 4, and we've got 5 and 6 sewed together. Now, if I flip this over, what I have done, and this is instead of having to draw it all, I've drawn a line right along here. Can everybody see that? Okay. Now, this is one of the biggest things. As long as I have been sewing and quilting, I've been sewing since I was 6 years old, but I've been quilting since I was probably about 10. So, and I've gathered over the years, and I started out with miniature quilts, ladies and gentlemen. Haha, 1/4 inch equals a 1/2 inch equals, well, that's another world. But I did learn one thing. don't hesitate to lay things out, lay things out, lay things out. It takes 2 seconds to lay a block out and 20 seconds to rub it out. And multiply that by a few blocks. After a while, I know where that block and quilt goes, into the infamous UFO zone. So let's do this. I'm going to lay my block or my parts of this block back in position. I'm going to take my section and lay them right sides together. And I can see right here I need to move that. So what I'm going to do is pick this up, and if for some reason you feel like you need to pin, please feel like you need to pin and pin. I myself have been doing this forever, I guess, like I say, since I was 10 years old. My fingers tend to be my pins. But right now, that right there, see, right here, is lining up with my edge. So I know that I've got a nice straight edge along here. I'll get these edges together, and I will sew this seam in just like it's supposed to be. Keep the seams open underneath as you sew over them. So make sure that everything is lining up. And because this is the flannel one, it is a little pickier. But if you, for some reason, are uncomfortable, I say it again, pin. Don't feel like you don't have to. Just because somebody else is not pinning doesn't mean that you don't have to or can't do it. We are all individuals, and we can do as we please to end up with the same result at the end. Okay, looks like I've just about got this sewn on. There we go. Get the old scissors to cut that for me. And there we have our piece. Now you can see that I've got a pretty good edge over here, and this is hanging out over here. That is normal. So that's how we're going to have that. Side 2 is done, and here is side 1. I won't flip back to the instructions for this part, but you can take a look. What we want to do is center these two pieces to each other. Doesn't necessarily mean it, because if we line it up down here and we sew this, we're going to have it way off. So let's kind of just center that little excess and then flip it over. Because see, when we flip it over, the view changes. We've got a great big ear up here, and we have another ear down here. So we can kind of distribute that length a little bit. So I will probably bring this block down, or this section down, just a smidge, because I don't want to lose too much at the top. When I trim these, I will be using a central line, but again, I'm not going to get into that right now so we get confused. But I'm going to trim these, and I want to lose as much of the outside as possible on one particular side or the other. If I lose a little bit from all the way around, it centers the exact block that I'm cutting out. So I'm going to do this again, making sure my seams are kept open. And now I will go ahead here and sew this together. This block is very forgiving, as long as you tend to follow a few little light rules of easy on the pressing, easy on the positioning, and there we go. All right, baby. We have our first block. Look at that. Looks a little rumply, but she's okay. At this point, I would press. My iron, unfortunately, is in the way of my computer. Or I should say the computer is in the way of my iron. And I would, everybody knows how to press. But make sure you press all your seams open. Just push them open and set the iron flat down on them. Don't drag your iron. Remember, these are all biased edges. And even though these are straight edges out here, that still can cause the block to wobble and wick, and we don't want any wobbly wicky. We'll be trimming these up in a later lesson, So now you should have the tools to be able to separate your layer cake into your piles of 6 pieces in 5 piles and cut them apart. Now remember, once you cut apart your first 6, you can make your first 6 blocks, set those aside. Once they are completely built like this, we don't care what order they end up in after this, because when we lay them out, everybody's layout will be a different subject. So right now, this is where I want everybody to be, and happy sewing. We'll see you at our next video. Ta-da!